Welcome to the latest episode of the Informing Choices mini-pod. Human enhancements can cover a wide range of capabilities, from increased strength, endurance and speed to enhanced memory, focus and even emotional control. They may also extend to more sophisticated modifications, such as integration of digital interfaces directly with the human brain, allowing for direct communication with computers and other digital devices, or the augmentation of sensory perceptions, for example, seeing a broader spectrum of light or hearing beyond the normal range. So with this as context, the question we're addressing on today's episode of the podcast is, what might the day in the life of an enhanced human in 2050 be like? To explore this fascinating question, I'm delighted to welcome back to the podcast futurist and keynote speaker, Rohit Talwar. Rohit, a warm welcome back.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me back. Always fun to be on the podcast.
So one of the things that struck me when I was thinking about this topic is that it's true to say that we've been enhancing ourselves for a very long time already. So what we will discuss today really is part of a natural extension, isn't it?
Absolutely. From the first time we applied a leech, or even earlier, to remove a poison from the body, in some way we're enhancing ourselves. So all medicine is some form of enhancement. Prosthetic limbs, starting to replace limbs, open heart surgery, all of those things are enhancing the body. And then through our diets, through various kind of supplements we take, throughout our lives, we can look at every aspect of humans and what they do and see that we've had enhancements, techniques to improve our memory. All of these things are forms of enhancement. But now what we're seeing is that in every field of what it means to be human, from the physical to the mental to the emotional, research is driving the boundaries. And those boundaries are blurring because of our research into synthetic biology, into information technology, and into, if you like, the animal world and the genetic makeup and the capabilities of animals and how those are brought about. Once we start to merge those, we start to think about almost creating a whole new set of species by 2050, if those advances bear fruit and they come together in a way that the biggest proponents of this would like. And you might call those the transhumanist movement.
It's interesting, isn't it? When we start to think about combination of technologies and approaches, that's when the real power from these new ideas, from these new technologies really comes to the fore. Because, each of these technologies that we'll talk about today are really interesting on their own, but in combination, there's an exponential difference, isn't there?
Absolutely, particularly when you start to think about the merging of the biological with the technological. So we're starting to decode our genes. We're starting to understand the function of individual genes and gene sequences. At the same time, we're looking at storing data on genes. We're looking at manipulating genes with things like CRISPR-Cas9. So we start to move towards the possibility that all of our genes could be communicating data about their health. We can start to replace genes and gene sequences. We can start designing our functionality. Then we start to think about the idea of either uploading our brains to some sort of exocortex, some sort of external brain, or before that, just uploading and downloading information to the brain. If we can store data on DNA, then we might not need to put everything in our brain on an exocortex. We might just store it somewhere on the genes in our bodies. The idea of a local area network for the body is now very real. Microsoft patented one 5 or 6 years ago. And so that allows us to connect all our organs together and have them monitored continuously. So they might be connected to our personal device, managed by AI. So 20 minutes, half an hour, even a day before we're due to have a heart attack, the various signals in our body will have been collected and our AI will be communicating with our physician. And if it's happening in our sleep, then by the time we wake up, the ambulance is already waiting for us. We're in a really interesting space where everything we thought was reality and everything we thought was science fiction are just getting blurred because of the speed at which we're moving. Particularly because the scientists don't know that they're not allowed to do that. The biological scientists don't know that they're not allowed to integrate with IT and create the ability to upload and download information to the brain, or insert, if you like, digital devices that bypass parts of the brain that aren't working, to replace organs with genetically engineered ones or synthetically printed ones that also have a huge amount of tech in them that are then communicating on their health, notifying our surgeon that actually they're not taking as well as they should have done to the host environment, to then allow that surgeon to go in, or a team to go in and manipulate both the organ and the surrounding environment to increase the chances of acceptance rather than rejection. So yeah, every aspect of what it means to be human, the cognitive, the physical, the genetic, even the emotional, as we start to understand them more, and we start to see everything as some sort of program, whether it's a biological or software program, we can now start to see how to interface it, how to manipulate it, how to upgrade it.
There's a couple of things that particularly struck me there. One is, my smartwatch, suddenly it's smarter than that, but it's not on my wrist. It's actually inside me, which is a really interesting notion, isn't it? And the other, what you've really done there, I think, is explore the potential for health to be much easier to manage, and that the technology and these new approaches will really help us live healthier and much longer lives.
Absolutely. So we haven't talked about life extension yet. So there's, on the one hand, the work going on telomeres, on the various different processes that impact aging, with more and more people arguing that aging is a disease, not a natural condition, so we can reverse it. So I think if we're talking even by 2030, we will start to see various things, from natural supplements and health regimes like having a cold shower every morning, through to genetic manipulation, and all sorts of, if you like, treatment regimes that could extend our life expectancy. I'd say by 2030, we could be looking at the potential to extend the life expectancy of someone who's looked after themselves well and manage their body well. You could see that extending by 20 years, by 2030. By 2050, I would say all bets are off. I wouldn't be surprised if we'd managed to get to a 50-year extension. Equally, if we hit Aubrey de Grey's target of escaping longevity, his longevity escape velocity, and you're starting to talk of lifespans of 200, 300 or more, that's an outside possibility by 2050. What we don't know is how humans would react to that.
Yeah.
Of having everyone on the planet never die if they didn't want to, or if they had the money to. And then the other side is the cryogenic freezing. So we can now cryogenically freeze people. We're not sure we can unfreeze them and get them back properly, fully functional, but I'm guessing in the next 10 years we'll crack that. We can capture an awful lot of how you think, just from everything you've ever written, everything you've ever said that's captured in some form. We get a lot of that. We are moving towards having you sit there for weeks or months with literally sensors capturing everything you say, everything you do, how you react, to the point where we could mimic your consciousness. It might not be perfect, but we might get a pretty good digital representation of Steve Wells's consciousness. So when we bring you back, we just upload all that stuff back into your brain. The challenges are immense. So I think by 2050, we will already have examples, and a lot of people have been cryogenically frozen now because they've got an illness that can't be treated. And that by the time they come back, we can. So it's time to treat them. But there is the potential that even in a 20-year window, some people will come back younger than their children. Longer term, it's going to be very, very likely they're also going to come back with a totally different reference point. So if you get cryogenically frozen in 2024, and you come back in 2050, the world would have changed beyond all recognition, potentially, and you're going to be younger than your children potentially. That could be so difficult. So we're going to have to think about techniques to actually help you re-socialize, and that might include new downloads. And then the question becomes, well, how much of you gets retained when we're adding all this stuff to make you aware of the world, understand what happened in the last 25 years, decay it in the way that a normal memory might, all of those things, and kind of bring you up to speed of what's happened to everyone in your family in that time. It'll be so freaky, so freaky. But it's very likely to happen. There's nothing to stop it. Forget regulation and all that. The people working on this don't give a tinker's cuss about regulation because they're just so excited about the potential to push the boundaries and to merge the boundaries and blur them, that they're just going for it. And regulation might come at them, but it's going to be really hard. And because this stuff gives economies the potential to pull away from others, and this whole enhancement biology market, the genetics market, could be bigger and have a bigger impact than AI. So the constraints on it are going to be relatively limited, I think. The idea that we might have engineered some new species by 2050 is a real possibility. And if AI is also doing a lot of the governance, then its reasoning mechanisms might be very different. Yeah. And it might argue that it's a lot less wasteful to have humans coming back that have been enhanced, so they're less wasteful, more productive, and actually contribute in that society, rather than and have none of the behaviors that hold us back today, whether it's violence, mental health issues, people who behave outside the law, all of those things, people who start wars. If we've engineered all that out, it might be that AI thinks we'll have a better society. And AI stands a very good chance of being in control by that point.
That's one of the things I was starting to think about there, is that the role of AI in that future, and how much control do we give AI? Do we allow AI to be responsible and accountable for developing some of these new life forms, for example? And are we okay for AI to have complete control on that, even if we as humans don't understand? Which in turn takes me back to one of the points that you mentioned there around regulation. And I guess it's only when we kind of really butt up against an understanding of the true potential of a piece of technology that people start getting really energized about regulation. Until that point, almost until the point we've gone over the line, it's then that people start getting really interested in regulation. And that's been the same for hundreds of years, from body snatchers through to AI, hasn't it? You push the boundaries and then someone says, actually, we need some regulation. We understand this stuff is really interesting and probably good, but we need some kind of container to put around the way that we develop some of these ideas.
Absolutely. If you look, Facebook has just celebrated its 20th anniversary. And we still don't have good regulation in place, whether it's and it's getting harder because of deep fakes, AI generated content, all the things that we know are wrong. And we just can't moderate fast enough. And the companies aren't willing to put the resources in order to control in the way we want. So not only are we not able to deal with all of the issues that have built up in the last 20 years, but we've got a whole set coming at us at speed. And if let's say you're Facebook, you're the 7th biggest company in the world. You've got 3 billion plus users. Last year's turnover was $135 billion. You made $40 billion profit. You're not looking at this and saying, well, I've got a big cash pool with which to make myself the safest platform on the planet. You're saying, how do I use that money to overtake Microsoft, who are the biggest company on the planet, and they're worth 3 trillion. And if I get to that point, I am truly bigger than some economies. Microsoft today is worth more than the Times top one, the FTSE 100 in the UK. Right. So you're bigger than most economies, actually.
Yeah.
And so the goal is not just to serve you up better ads or to serve you better photographs of cats or whatever. The goal is now to use this engine and all the data available to you to maximize your returns and grow faster than anyone else and eat into every sector you possibly can, and to turn your user base into your developer base. So we're sort of going off the subject of human enhancement, but only for a bit, because you can see where it starts to come back, where Facebook want to turn their artificial general intelligence engine over to the marketplace to say anyone can develop AGIs who wants to with this open source system. Now, on the one hand, that's great. On the other, that's very scary that you're giving people full power of human intelligence to do what they want. But out of those 3 billion users, let's say a tiny, tiny fraction, just 100,000 decide to develop stuff. And to put that in context, there are 3 million custom versions of ChatGPT out there. So you're going to see millions potentially of this, people developing code, developing tools that will be uncontrollable. A huge number of those, I'm guessing, will be in the area of doing things around the human brain and body. Engineering new life forms, engineering enhancements, engineering better nootropic treatments, the drugs that can enhance our cognition, engineering other treatments, whether it's pharmaceutical or surgical. So we'll be moving into a world where, like, if you like, home scientists will be pushing the boundaries faster than medical science, because they won't have the restrictions that traditional medical researchers have, but they'll have access to all of that data. The amount of data that we will carry on the human body is mind-blowing. The only way we'll be able to collate that, interpret it, and do something with it is if we use AI tools. And again, we'll move so fast once we have those tools that we'll leave government standing in the dust. Regulation will be so far behind that we'll almost throw our hands up in the air and just ask corporations to self-regulate, or we'll do something really interesting where we'll say, you know what, we can't stop you, so we'll own you. We will take your IP into government ownership. We'll take your equity into government ownership. And then we'll reward your current shareholders in some way. We'll give you a return on a licensing fee, if you like, for the return. But we'll control you to stop you being bigger than everyone else. We won't be able to do it through regulation of your behavior. So we'll do it through regulation of your earnings and your rewards and your ownership. You can see that becoming a very real possibility.
That feels a little bit more palatable than the complete reverse of that, where some of the big tech companies take over whole countries.
And it's going to be very close. Like, if in the US presidential election now, if Zuckerberg was to stand against Biden and Trump, I wonder what proportion of the votes he'd get. Because an awful lot of people have a better relationship with Facebook, a more constant relationship with Facebook, more trust. They use it for more aspects of their lives than their connection to Trump or Biden.
Yeah.
So you could easily see people going, well, why wouldn't we support it? Like, Musk has toyed with the idea of standing for president. Who knows whether that would be worse than Biden or Trump. But Zuckerberg is not as controversial. So you could see him being a potential candidate for that. I don't know if he'd ever want to, but you could see governments kind of throwing their hands up in despair and going, we've got so much data from AI, from society, from our people's, humans, society's genetics, all the information from their brains and bodies. We've got all these innovations coming. This is bigger than a collective brainful for leaders. Should we hand this over to tech companies to run this and use their tech, and then we provide some sort of overall societal governance function and an oversight and more of a directional steer, but we let them execute. And then maybe we end up like Switzerland, where you have very regular referendums and it becomes part of the culture. Or you kind of learn from the blockchain world where you start to have decentralized autonomous governments where everyone in society can have a vote on everything, but it's executed by these corporations. The pace of change technologically and in terms of health sciences mean that we're going to need radically different ways of thinking and behaving to govern it.
There are just so many thoughts going on in my head at the moment, all of which would take us down any number of rabbit holes. So if I can bring it back, and you're right, all of the things that you were speaking about then play into this idea of what an enhanced human's life might be like in 2050. So if we kind of go down that particular rabbit hole, where do you want to start? What does this enhanced human do? Where does he or she do it? What happens to them? What do they enjoy? And what are the kind of underlying things that makes their day?
All right, well, let's start with you wake up in the morning, you're woken up by your AI, and it very gently wakes you, starting with whatever parts of the body wake up easiest and cause the least shock to you. So it may be that it starts with a tingle in your toes, and gradually it kind of gets you out of your sleep state, ready. It's already downloaded for you the background information that you need to know in order to navigate the things you want to do today. It's monitored your DNA. Your DNA has told it what state it's in, and that's helped it determine the appropriate mix of food to give you that's been personally designed, which might also include some, some genes that you're going to swallow that are going to be manipulated into your body by implants there that are doing gene replacement all the time and dissolving the old ones that we no longer need. You've then, everything you do during the course of the day, your body is capturing that, the heat, the kinetic energy, it's capturing all of that and turning it into energy to power everything around you. And if you're a very active person, you're active mentally, physically, all those things, then you might actually be earning more than you consume. So you might be constantly, there might be a little window that pops up every now and then in your visual implants to tell you how much money you've made today from power from contributing to the local grid. But anyway, so you've consumed that. You're then looking at visual overlays of, your day is panned out for you. You can see what you're going to do, all the things you said you want to do, who you're going to meet. And then as you navigate through your day, so your AI will show you kind of for how your skin looks today, what would be the best clothing to wear to show you in the best light over the course of the day. And that clothing will also be adaptable completely to your genetics. So if you're going to be in 3 different environments, let's say a meeting place for the charity you're involved in, a quiet setting where you're having a catch-up coffee with a friend, and then some sort of bar in the evening, your AI might be choosing for you clothes that can adapt their properties. So you don't have to change 3 times, they'll just adapt their particular properties in terms of breathability and regulation of other bodily functions, so you can wear the same outfit all day long. It might even change color. And then you'll choose some of the things you'd like to be able to do during the course of the day while you're operating. So you might decide that part of your brain today, you're not doing that much mentally taxing stuff. So you're willing to allow a portion of your brain to be put into a shared computing resource. So other people who are doing computationally intensive stuff can use your brain on a giant distributed network, and again, pay you for the time they've used in your brain. So who knows, your brain might be running giant visual database searches or whatever. Then as you go along to the day, you go into a meeting, you get to your first meeting, whatever mode of transport you use. Let's say you've taken a driverless vehicle to get you there. The vehicle does a quick body scan of everything that's going on in your body and just feeds that data back to your medical service, just in case there's anything going wrong. You don't even need to know unless there's an issue, but it's monitoring all your devices. You're in a little bit of a hurry because you left late. So you've authorized the vehicle to pay the vehicles next to you to get out of the way. so you can get there faster. When you get to the meeting, instantly your AI is having a chat with all of the other AIs in the room wirelessly. So your brain is effectively talking wirelessly to everyone else. So you're getting a scan of what mood everyone's in, and who's had a fight with their partner the night before and therefore needs to be delicate, who's buzzing with ideas, and really needs to be heard quickly so that they don't turn grumpy and ruin the meeting. So you'll have a real sense of that. And an awful lot of the conversation could be going on telepathically, effectively, like wirelessly, sharing information, sharing visuals and things. And our AIs will be advising us in those meetings, like monitoring our genetics, monitoring all our systems, our oxygen flow, our heart rate, the pattern of neural firing, to say, actually, here's something that you're missing that you would have talked about before, but because you're a little tired, why don't we throw this idea in? Or monitoring all these signals, you feel like you're about to get a switch off and lose concentration or get angry. So let's pull back. Let's go into a minute of deep meditation. I'm going to play a little tune, a little bit of music to help you meditate. No one will know because your eyes will be fixed on them. We'll be controlling, the overlays on your eyes, so it looks like you're moving your eyeballs to whoever's listening, whoever's talking. But we'll have a fully immersive experience in meetings. That will be possible. When we come out of there, we might have a little supplement that gives us the nutrition we need during the course of the day, because we only want to eat one tasty meal during the rest of the day. The rest of the day, we just want enough sustenance. And actually, the most enhanced of us might have sensors in the body that are converting sunlight to energy, so we don't need that much food anyway. It becomes more of a pleasure thing than a fuel necessity. We go then have coffee with a friend, and that might be where we have the most human interaction of the day. We've deliberately gone to one of those antique 2024 coffee shops that still has human baristas, that still has all of that stuff, because we want to see what it was like back then, and we want to have normal conversations. We're going to switch everything off and just be very present to that friend. And then we're going to go out to a nightclub with some other friends, and then we want to switch on everything. So we want to have all of our genes go through a cycle we've chosen. So we want a gradual build-up of energy over the course of the evening. We want to peak when the DJ sends out those pheromones and other chemicals into the air. We want to respond to those, so we're at a dancing high. We're having the best experience possible without any of the narcotic side effects. And then we want to come down very gradually, not just cognitively, but in our whole body. We want to rest our whole system so that we can sleep naturally whenever we choose to go to bed, and our system will allow us to do that and regulate us. But also we won't have the hangover effects or any of that. So we can still choose our experiences. We can have much better control over those experiences than if we were to take narcotics. So we can get all the highs, we can get the kind of experience you might get with ayahuasca or LSD or cocaine or crack or whatever, but with none of the side effects. And with it all being legal and it all being like available. And then coaxed into sleep. During our sleep, our body already does a lot of regenerative work. But now, because we have a whole range of ingested devices and implanted devices, they'll be doing the monitoring of organs, of cells, repair work where necessary, sending requests to our control device, our AI, which might then be scheduling a kind of maintenance, set of maintenance requirements, which are turned into a spec for our next medical visit, where we'll go and we might have 30 or 40 different procedures performed on us to do a bit of a memory upgrade, repair some cells, put a new implant in, all those things. But we'll basically go in and like having an MOT and a service on our car, we'll have exactly the same thing on our bodies. We won't want to have that done every week, but we might go in 4 times a year to have that upgrade and kind of repair work beyond what the implants might do. Part of this is also, as new information is downloaded to our brains and uploaded from our brains, and there's so much that could be uploaded, we'll also be learning more and more, both in a cognitive sense, but in a genetic sense, as to how to deal with the impact of this information. Because quite often we'll see something and we'll say, I feel like this, it's made my stomach churn. But it's a cognitive signal. It's information we've had visually or verbally. There might be some smells and other things attached. So our system will then have to work out how to manage the impact of more and more information, potentially more shocking information, more overwhelming information. So it's kind of managing a whole body response to it so that we don't get overwhelmed. And then we might choose, once a year again, we might choose to have a sensory upgrade, almost to try it. Or every quarter, we might choose to try something different. So I might want to have night vision. I might want to have the hearing of a dog. I might want the kind of the olfactory smell capabilities of animals in the wild. I might just want to have those for a while. I might want to have the taste buds of some of the best chefs, or the nose of the people who test and taste wine. I might want to have that for a little bit, and to be able to download those senses, have them for a while, and then give them up and have something else. So I'll also be able to play in a kind of designer way with my body. I guess the kind of more challenging stuff is, once we have all that information and we know our full genetic makeup, what does that mean in terms of childbirth, in terms of tax? So if I know, for example, that you have a genetic disposition to addiction as a government, or to certain conditions, will I say I'll tax you more if you don't have the appropriate treatments for that? If you're having a baby, will we say, well, we'll tax you more if you have that child knowing it's got certain conditions, or we'll tax you less if you give that child certain enhancements in the womb, or even at the the seed stage, so that your child is a higher performer, that you're effectively increasing the chances of that child being a higher performer in society, and therefore of greater value. So that ability to really play at that level could start to emerge long before 2050, but also it means that quite possibly we'll also be able to raise children outside the womb. So ex vitro raising, where we could do much more of that without it harming the mother. And it may be that we actually hand over responsibility to a service that raises our child for us pre-birth, and we just specify the functionality we want of that child, the IQ, the natural IQ level, all these things that we want for that child, the level of disease resistance, all of these things. And the more requirements we have, the more we might pay for that. But the more benefits we'll get in terms of lower taxes, because that entity, when it's born and kind of goes through, might be educated faster and productive faster in whatever things they're doing by that time that we would currently call work. There you go. There's a few thoughts on life in 2050.
I mean, wow! Because doesn't that first of all seem just immensely radical to what we might think of as normal life now? And one of the things that particularly struck me was, I can see the roots in everything you've spoken about in technology development today.
Absolutely.
It does represent a whole bunch of different challenges around regulation, around access, around equity, and those kind of things. But the thing that it really does, it plays into a human desire for choice as well. I do think there's a whole different conversation perhaps around some of those issues, around the ethics and how society more broadly might respond to those. But I think that was a really lovely perspective on how different an individual's day could be in 2050.
Absolutely. It creates all sorts of interesting questions and challenges around choice, around governance, around access, around inclusivity, around diversity, around the ethics of both the science and the applications. But it also raises fundamental questions about what we want, what we should allow, who should make those determinations, what's the basis on which we make those determinations. Is economics and value added the prime driver, or are there some other things? And how do you determine societal value, societal contribution, when that perception varies across nations, even across cultures? So it raises all sorts of stuff that's bigger than a brainful. Each, as you say, each individual field of science and technology is seeing phenomenal progress. And then we're seeing them come together. We're seeing the potential of things like quantum computing just allow us to do incredible things much faster once we work out how to use it well. AI giving us power, genetics giving us all sorts of fascinating possibilities in terms of new materials and engineering the human body. What it opens up is this potential to do all these things that sound crazy today with that technology. And it raises the question as to who is it that we want making decisions about this? I don't know that I want the equivalent of my current crop of members of parliament who don't really understand a lot of this stuff. I'm not sure they're the ones I would most want making the decisions. But I don't know who I do want. Is it philosophers? Is it the scientists? Is it economists? Is it community councils? Is it the whole of society? Who makes those choices? And what happens when people start to use those technologies to exercise influence and power on the global scale? So I do things to engineer a super soldier force. And then I also do something using chemicals in the water, all sorts of things to impact my adversaries and impact their genetic makeup. Or I do things that in some way make life harder for them from a physical perspective. What does that start to do to national boundaries? What does that start to do to the relationships? Does Iceland suddenly engineer itself to be the most advanced and smart physical society on the planet and suddenly take over the rest of Europe because it's just smarter and faster and more innovative than the rest of Europe? Where are the boundaries of what's possible? And we haven't really talked about self-replicating technologies, but if all of this in parallel, we could start to see self-replicating nanobots and all sorts of things that replicate not just our mental functions, but our physical functions. And whoever gets there first, it puts them in this entire new world of possibility. Now, on the one hand, that would be fantastic that I could maybe put up a 20-story building in one day by creating enough nanobots to do that. But how do I regulate that? Do I then let those nanobots go off and just keep doing that? Or do I insist that they're shut down at the end of the day and switched off? And you have to create new ones next time with a single function. We enter this whole new world, which is bigger than a brainful in terms of what the possibilities are, but even bigger than that brainful when you think about, well, how do you regulate it and what's appropriate?
I really like the way you kind of presented some sort of answers about the future, about what the day of an enhanced human might be like in 2050, and have concluded with a whole bunch of questions that we're really not going to answer today.
Right.
Rohit, that's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Insightful and creative as ever. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I look forward to our next conversation.
And thank you everyone for listening. Do let your friends and colleagues know about the Informing Choices mini pod, and there'll be another episode along very soon.